He's a designer here in LA,
That's
so if you're
nice.
looking out, yeah.
Back of a car seat, but I like it. In a good way.
Before her death, Loni Kaye Anderson reportedly asked her daughter to keep the cameras away. "Let them remember me laughing," she said softly, "not fading." Those were among her final words, spoken just days before her passing on August 3, 2025, at a hospital in Los Angeles. She was 79 years old and just 2 days short of her 80th birthday. To millions, she had been a television icon. But to those closest to her, Loni had spent her final years in reflection, reckoning with the pressure of a life lived inside a frame, always smiling, always poised, always being watched. She had carried that image for nearly 5 decades, even when it weighed more than she could say. The world knew her best as Jennifer Marlowe, the glamorous, sharp-witted receptionist in WKRP in Cincinnati, a role that earned her 2 Emmy nominations and 3 Golden Globe nods. But the woman behind the image fought hard to be taken seriously in an industry that only valued her when she looked perfect. Her family confirmed that she died after a long illness, though they declined to share medical details. In their statement, they wrote simply, "We are heartbroken but comforted by the love she gave, the laughter she inspired, and the strength she carried with such grace." Anderson's death came quietly, but it left behind a silence that speaks volumes. She was not just a face on a screen. She was a woman who navigated fame with discipline, survived heartbreak without scandal, and refused to let time erase her dignity. In this video, we explore the complex legacy of Loni Kaye Anderson. Not just the actress, but the fighter beneath the surface. The glamour, the struggle, the quiet pain, and the final choice to leave the stage without applause. Some legends burn out, others simply step away. Loni did both, and left behind a story that deserves to be told. Loni Kaye Anderson was born on August 5, 1945 in St. Paul, Minnesota. She grew up in a world far removed from Hollywood's glare, raised in a conservative household where discipline, decorum, and appearance mattered. From an early age, she was unmistakably beautiful. That beauty became both a blessing and a cage, one she would carry for the rest of her life. Her early years were marked by discipline. She attended the University of Minnesota, where she studied art and theater, but acting wasn't seen as a practical path. She modeled to pay bills, entered local beauty contests, and won attention for her physical presence long before her voice was ever heard. That would become the pattern. She would be seen before she was listened to. In the late 1960s and early 70s, Loni began appearing in guest roles on popular television shows. She played nurses, secretaries, girlfriends. Always charming, always composed, never complicated, Hollywood didn't know what to do with a woman who looked like a fantasy but wanted to act like a professional. She pushed for better parts. She didn't get them. Not yet. Then in 1978, she landed the role that would define her career. Jennifer Marlowe on WKRP in Cincinnati. The show was a modest workplace comedy about a struggling radio station, but Loni's performance turned it into something greater. Her character, the station's receptionist, was unlike anything audiences had seen. She was stunning, yes, but also the smartest person in the room. She never raised her voice. She never chased attention. She simply commanded it. Jennifer Marlowe became an icon, and Loni became a star. The contradiction was part of the appeal. She was funny without being silly, sexual without being objectified, powerful without ever having to say it, and yet the industry around her refused to believe she was more than the hair, the dresses, the smile. At the peak of her fame, Anderson was everywhere. Talk shows, red carpets, magazine covers. But with visibility came expectation. She was asked to be ageless, flawless, and endlessly gracious. When she fought for better scripts, she was labeled difficult. When she defended herself in interviews, she was called icy. When she showed emotion, she was told to calm down. The contradiction of her public image mirrored the deeper theme of her life, that of a woman constantly walking the line between being admired and being underestimated. Her personal relationships suffered under the weight of that contradiction. Most famously, her marriage to Burt Reynolds placed her in a storm of publicity, control, and conflict that she later described as both emotionally exhausting and deeply lonely. Even after WKRP ended, Loni tried to reclaim her career on her terms. She starred in made-for-TV movies, often playing women with complicated pasts. Survivors, mothers, women forced to fight for their dignity. The performances were strong, but the industry's attention had already shifted. She was no longer the fresh blonde face of primetime. She was aging, and Hollywood has always punished women for that. Her final public decade was marked by quiet withdrawal. She made few appearances, turned down interview requests, and seemed to intentionally step out of the spotlight she had once dominated. Some said she was bitter. Others said she was simply done performing for a system that never really saw her. The theme that runs through Loni Kaye Anderson's life is that of image versus identity. She was a woman trapped in the version of herself that the world demanded, always trying to assert that she was more, deeper, stronger, more complex than the surface everyone celebrated. In her final years, as illness took hold, she chose silence. It was not surrender, it was clarity. Loni Anderson was more than her legacy, but the world only saw what it wanted. Now we begin to look closer. Loni Kaye Anderson's rise was not explosive. It was earned, it was patient, and it was filled with quiet battles that few in the industry ever truly understood. From the moment she stepped onto a soundstage, Loni knew that she would have to work twice as hard to be taken half as seriously, and still, she showed up, poised, prepared, determined. Her early career was shaped by small, thankless roles. She played the attractive neighbor, the nurse, the woman who smiled in the background, while the male lead carried the story. Casting directors didn't see range. They saw potential for ratings. Loni, however, saw something else. She saw an industry that praised beauty and punished ambition. She learned to play the part while planning her escape from it. In 1978, her opportunity finally came. WKRP in Cincinnati was a quirky new sitcom with no big stars and modest expectations. But it would change everything. As Jennifer Marlowe, Loni took what could have been a shallow stereotype and transformed it into a cultural statement. Her character was a blonde receptionist, the kind of role that traditionally existed for decoration. But Loni played her with elegance, confidence, and restraint. Jennifer wasn't naive. She was deliberate. She didn't chase power. She already had it. Audiences immediately responded. The ratings rose. Fan letters poured in. Critics praised her timing, her intelligence, her subtlety. She became one of the most recognizable faces on television, and for a while she was untouchable. She earned multiple Emmy and Golden Globe nominations. She was invited onto every major talk show. She was featured on magazine covers not just as an actress, but as a new kind of television woman, one who didn't need to be loud to be heard. But behind the scenes, Loni was already beginning to feel the pressure. Producers wanted to push her into more revealing costumes. Publicists urged her to play up her sex appeal. Studio executives suggested she lighten her voice, smile more, soften her tone. She resisted. She insisted on script approval. She negotiated for better pay, and with every act of resistance, she was labeled more difficult. Then came Burt Reynolds. Their relationship began with charm and chemistry. Reynolds was one of the most famous actors in the world. He was bold, masculine, unpredictable. She was elegant, self-contained, graceful. They were opposites, and the public devoured their story. They married in 1988, and the media made them a golden couple. But inside the marriage, things were far from golden. Loni would later describe the relationship as controlling, emotionally draining, and at times deeply damaging. She put her career on pause, took on the role of caregiver, and adopted their son while enduring tabloid scrutiny and whispered rumors about their personal life. When the marriage ended in 1994, it was brutal and very public. Reynolds gave interviews. Loni, for the most part, did not. Her early career was shaped by small, thankless roles. She played the attractive neighbor, the nurse, the woman who smiled in the background while the male lead carried the story. Casting directors didn't see range. They saw potential for ratings. Loni, however, saw something else. She saw an industry that praised beauty and punished ambition. She learned to play the part while planning her escape from it. In 1978, her opportunity finally came. WKRP in Cincinnati was a quirky new sitcom with no big stars and modest expectations, but it would change everything. As Jennifer Marlowe, Loni took what could have been a shallow stereotype and transformed it into a cultural statement. Her character was a blonde receptionist, the kind of role that traditionally existed for decoration. But Loni played her with elegance, confidence, and restraint. Jennifer wasn't naive. She was deliberate. She didn't chase power. She already had it. Audiences immediately responded. The ratings rose. Fan letters poured in. Critics praised her timing, her intelligence, her subtlety. She became one of the most recognizable faces on television. And for a while, she was untouchable. She earned multiple Emmy and Golden Globe nominations. She was invited onto every major talk show. She was featured on magazine covers not just as an actress, but as a new kind of television woman, one who didn't need to be loud to be heard. But behind the scenes, Loni was already beginning to feel the pressure. Producers wanted to push her into more revealing costumes. Publicists urged her to play up her sex appeal. Studio executives suggested she lighten her voice, smile more, soften her tone. She resisted. She insisted on script approval. She negotiated for better pay. And with every act of resistance, she was labeled more difficult. Then came Burt Reynolds. Their relationship began with charm and chemistry. Reynolds was one of the most famous actors in the world. He was bold, masculine, unpredictable. She was elegant, self-contained, graceful. They were opposites, and the public devoured their story. They married in 1988, and the media made them a golden couple. But inside the marriage, things were far from golden. Loni would later describe their relationship as controlling, emotionally draining, and at times deeply damaging. She put her career on pause, took on the role of caregiver, and adopted their son while enduring tabloid scrutiny and whispered rumors about their personal life. When the marriage ended in 1994, it was brutal and very public. Reynolds gave interviews. Loni, for the most part, did not. She eventually broke her silence in her memoir, My Life in High Heels. The book revealed years of manipulation, betrayal, and exhaustion. It wasn't a revenge story, it was a reckoning. She wrote not to settle scores, but to reclaim the narrative that had been stolen from her. The years that followed were filled with attempts to reignite her career. She starred in biopics, guest roles, and TV movies. She played Jane Mansfield. She played single mothers. She played women on the edge. And she played all of them well. But the momentum was gone. The roles weren't what they used to be. The phones didn't ring the same way. And the smile that once lit up magazine covers began to look more like armor. Still, Loni never stopped trying to evolve. She became an advocate for lung disease awareness after her daughter's diagnosis. She spoke about ageism in Hollywood. She mentored young actresses who were facing the same kind of image traps she had battled for decades. She did it all with grace. But the industry had moved on. By the 2010s, she made fewer and fewer public appearances. She declined interviews, rarely appeared at reunions, and politely refused invitations to talk about WKRP. When asked why, a close friend said she answered simply, "I've already given them everything they asked for. I have nothing left to explain." In those final years, as her health declined, Loni began to say no more often. No to public appearances. No to cameras. No to pretending. She wanted to be remembered, yes, but on her own terms. As an actress, as a mother, as a woman who fought the system, played the game, and survived it. And then one day, she stopped appearing altogether. In the final chapter of her life, Loni Kaye Anderson stepped back from the lights, not because the roles had dried up, but because she was tired of playing one. Her retreat wasn't sudden. It was deliberate. It was quiet. And it was rooted in years of exhaustion. Not from the work, but from the image. Behind the curtain, Loni was confronting what she had long been forced to suppress. The years spent smiling for cameras while privately enduring anxiety, heartbreak, and the unbearable weight of being reduced to an aesthetic. She had created a character the world adored, but the cost was forgetting who she really was underneath it. In interviews from the 1990s and early 2000s, Loni hinted at that cost. She spoke gently but honestly, about the pressure to stay thin, the fear of aging on camera, the loneliness that came with being viewed as a fantasy rather than a person. "There were days I looked in the mirror and didn't see myself anymore," she once said. Only the version everyone expected. Her memoir revealed cracks in the illusion. She described emotional isolation during her marriage to Burt Reynolds, how his public image often overshadowed hers, and how the divorce stripped her of more than just dignity. It robbed her of the belief that Hollywood ever truly saw her for who she was. After the book was published, she received both praise and backlash. Some applauded her strength, others accused her of bitterness. She remained composed through all of it, even as her heart quietly broke. In the 2010s, Loni's public silence deepened. She stopped attending industry events. She declined all talk of a WKRP reunion. She turned down offers for legacy interviews, tribute segments, and even a proposed documentary. Her reason, according to a family member, was simple. "They only want to celebrate the version they invented, not the woman I actually am." As her illness progressed, those closest to her say she became more reflective. She reread old scripts, revisited journals from the 1980s, and spent long hours looking out the window of her Los Angeles home. She spoke often about her parents, her children, and the strange feeling of being famous and forgotten at the same time. Shortly before her death, Loni made a private request to her family. No celebrity-packed funeral, no glossy retrospective. She wanted peace, not spectacle. The woman who once lit up primetime didn't want the spotlight in her final hours. She wanted stillness. When her passing was announced on August 3, 2025, the news was met with both surprise and sorrow. Headlines called her TV's classic blonde, the queen of WKRP, the face of an era. Few spoke about the woman who spent decades trying to separate herself from that image. Few mentioned the intelligence, the restraint, the quiet fury she carried inside. Her daughter's statement offered something closer to the truth. "My mother was stronger than anyone ever gave her credit for. She gave the world her grace, and it gave her very little back. She left this world the way she lived in it, with elegance, with silence, and on her own terms." The public reacted with a kind of reverent guilt. Old interviews resurfaced. Tributes poured in. Women who grew up watching her shared stories of how she changed what a beautiful woman on television could be. Not a joke, not an accessory, but a presence, a force. In the days that followed, Hollywood offered its usual condolences, but those who truly understood knew this wasn't just the loss of a star. It was the end of a performance that had gone on far too long, a performance that began with applause but ended in exhaustion. Loni Anderson was not a tragedy. She was a truth too often overlooked, too often misunderstood, and far too rare. At Legends and Secrets, we believe Loni Kaye Anderson was far more than the glamorous receptionist who graced our television screens every week in the late 1970s. She was more than the smile, more than the voice, more than the blonde hair. She was a woman navigating an industry built on illusion, while quietly fighting to keep her reality intact. Hollywood was never kind to women like Loni, women who were breathtakingly beautiful, undeniably smart, and unwilling to be boxed into roles that diminished either. She played the game for a time. She played it well, but she never surrendered to it. Her elegance wasn't performance, it was survival. The roles she chose, even in the years after WKRP in Cincinnati, reflect that tension. She portrayed women with broken hearts, women rebuilding, women choosing dignity over chaos. There was always a quiet strength behind her characters, a resistance wrapped in glamour. She gave those roles depth because she knew firsthand what it meant to be underestimated and misunderstood. Loni's story is not simply one of fame, it's about endurance, about staying whole in a business that wants to break you into parts. She was a woman who built a career on being seen and then had to fight her entire life to be heard. When the industry moved on, she didn't beg it to stay. She left it with grace and gave herself the freedom to exist outside its expectations. Her retreat from the spotlight was not weakness. It was a final, quiet refusal. Refusal to perform a version of herself she no longer recognized. Refusal to shrink herself for the comfort of a public that only wanted nostalgia. She chose privacy over applause, and that choice speaks louder than any standing ovation. We don't believe Loni Anderson should be remembered as a symbol. We believe she should be remembered as a woman who endured, who resisted, who chose herself, even when the world demanded she remain a myth. Now we ask you, did the public ever truly see her, or did they only see what they wanted to believe? Was her silence in the final years a retreat, or the most honest performance of her life? Share your thoughts. Share her truth. Because legacies like Loni's are fragile. They depend on whether we're ready to look past the surface and finally listen. She didn't ask for a farewell tour. She didn't crave a final standing ovation. Loni Kaye Anderson simply stepped out of frame, leaving behind the shimmer of a woman who once carried the weight of perfection with astonishing grace. She had spent a lifetime being seen, but only in the ways others chose to define her. In the end, she chose not to be seen at all. Her story is not just about what she gave to television. It's about what she gave up to survive it. The youth she had to preserve, the voice she had to soften, the power she had to disguise. And still, she gave us something unforgettable. Not a character, but a presence. Controlled, commanding, quietly revolutionary. The silence she embraced in her final years was not emptiness. It was reclamation. A reclaiming of self from a business that never asked who she truly was. In that silence, we finally see her. Not the perfect blonde in heels, but the woman who outlasted the image. Some stories are never told. But now you know. Loni Kaye Anderson's legacy is not a hairstyle or a sitcom rerun. It is the courage to walk away without bitterness, to age without apology, and to leave this world on her own terms. She didn't just play elegance, she lived it. And when the cameras faded, she didn't chase the light. She let it go.